as every other Mustang coming out of the Ford assembly plant. GT3 rules require that it has to be a factory-based car sold to the public like any other. But from there, it gets a little special treatment. It gets cut, chopped, disassembled, and then reassembled with steel and carbon fiber for the absolute optimum aerodynamic design and weight distribution allowed by the rules.
When it arrives to us, I mean, it pretty much looks like a turnkey car minus the fascias. We're fortunate enough to get them at a very bare state, so we don't have to spend hours on scraping all that stuff and getting it out. The initial cuts are kind of rudimentary. Then we'll go through, with our templates, gauges, and lay out the precise areas that need to be cut and deburred prior to arriving at Multimatic. The GT3s, when we're done modifying them, it doesn't really look anything like a vehicle whatsoever because we cut so much sheet metal off of that car. When the body itself arrives at Multimatic, they can just start throwing tubes at it and all the carbon bits that go along with it.
Using a unibody from Ford and turning it into a GT3 car is quite a daunting task. A lot of potential pitfalls everywhere, and you're trying to keep the FIA happy, trying to get the information from the people, the engineers doing the work, and then fit into all these little boxes that the FIA gives you to create a car that fits into the window that they're establishing.
And what would a Mustang be if it didn't look and sound like a Mustang? The team is constantly iterating to find the perfect balance of design, downforce, weight distribution, and drag. If motorsport had a form of dark arts, it would be aerodynamics, or aero. One part of this is the practice of turning the invisible airflow over the car into downforce, an additional weight on the tires and suspension to increase grip, cornering speeds, and overall performance.
At Sebring, we had some issues with the first version of the bodywork, but we quickly recovered. We continue to work through those problems.
The development path, it's a lot faster because you can make rapid prototype parts literally overnight. When you go through the development process, particularly on the scale model, it's probably 80% of the parts you make and test, you throw away. The ideal scenario would be a smaller car.
Mustang has a pretty big frontal area, but we found some good tweaks to actually overcome this, and in the end had to bring back some drag into the car to actually be in the FIA box for aero requirement.
There's dozens, if not more, of wind tunnels around the world, and they're all designed slightly differently. The big difference is the actual size of the tunnel, so the width and the height. The tunnel that we homologate in is narrower and smaller, so that increases what we call the blockage ratio. So basically the size of the car compared to the size of the tunnel. And as that blockage ratio increases, we actually saw the forces on our car increase. It was a little bit unexpected, at least it was larger than expected. So it's a bit of an eye-opening experience the first time we did a private test. Today is a lot of just kind of final tuning and validation stuff, going through our different options that we can run on track, mostly just brake blanking. And going through those different changes kind of give us an idea if we're running too hot or too cold, we can make those adjustments. The other big thing is the rear wing angle of attack adjustment. So basically just the angle of the wing on the car. And that's the biggest tool that we have on a race weekend to adjust the balance of the car.
It's a constant battle for balance. An extra degree of wing angle in the rear might equal more stick in the corners and a bit more drag on the straights, which could mean less speed. Everything matters. It's hot out, the air is less dense, there's less downforce. Cold, the opposite is usually true. Back to testing.
We found some little issues that we kind of preempted, really. We knew we were going to come across them.
You have to tap it up so you don't just let it go to see how far it goes. There's a couple different issues going on. We're having some pretty extreme knockback. Knockback is the pads that clamp on the rotors, they get literally knocked back away. When you go to the pedal, you recognize that as a long pedal. In a lot of race car stuff, you run knockback springs, you run seals. They don't necessarily drag, but they hang out real close. And then every time you go to the brake pedal, it's right there and it's consistent. You do not want to go to the brakes and question if it's going to be there. That's terrible for your mindset as a driver.
It's not super heavy. And what chip you're adding? It's getting crazy.
Many changes, many discs, many calipers. many brake lines as well. We had loads of different iterations, so we just had to iron them out and go through them all. I mean, it's probably upwards of maybe 22 times, I'd say.
We're on day 3 of our 3-day test at Monte Blanco. This is the 3rd week in a row we've been testing the GT3 at multiple circuits in Europe. This circuit presents a very tough braking challenge for us. It has revealed some weaknesses we've been worried about. We've gone through a lot of braking permutations to try and get the temperatures and the brakes under control. Chassis 1 has been our prototype nearly to 13,000 kilometers on this chassis with really limited service in between tests. So now we're running in the spec that we expect to run in the series, which is no dive planes and a maximum of 7 degrees of wing angle. The new splitter spec is going to come next week. We'll fit those to the IMSA cars, then test them at the BOP test. That's unfortunately the first time we're going to see those parts. To me, that's a big risk. Run into a sanctioned test where we have unknown longevity of parts. We certainly think directionally we've made all the changes we need to. To be completely honest, this last 2 days of this test has really kicked our ass. Today's been better. We've been able to do more laps, but it's been difficult to establish a rhythm fighting the old car, the old parts, and braking problems, frankly. There's a lot of worries.